Prototype serves as a model to understand concepts. Some people also called it a prototype theory. Initially, this theory was proposed by Eleanor Roch and her co-workers. They believe that concepts work as a model in which certain categories of that model are more typical than others. For example, we have a concept bird. There would be few birds which would come to our mind more quickly when we say the word bird as compared to others. So those birds which come to our mind are the stereotypical or the typical examples of the concept bird. You just think for a while and imagine, if you say the word bird, which thing comes to your mind or which bird comes to your mind? In our context, it may be sparrow, it may be crow, or a pigeon. So these aspects of this concept may be the typical aspects of the concept bird in our context. Therefore, they may be called as a prototype of a bird, and these prototypes help us to make the concept. We start with the concept with these typical examples, and then we move on to the peripheral or other relevant examples, and we move further in understanding that concept. If we move forward and see what is the typical example of furniture, probably it would be chair or table, which would come to our mind first when we think about furniture, and then the other less typical forms would emerge. For example, lamp or other things like side table, etc. So there are always certain typical images or categories of a certain concept which emerge in our mind first, and we roughly call them prototypes. And these prototypes help us build those concepts and those categories, and we reach to the similar objects in the same category, and keeps on developing our concepts or our prototypes about that particular concept. This approach has been supported by Roch's experiments on various objects, including human beings. And we came to know that speakers tend to agree more readily on typical members than on less typical members. So these typical members become a symbol of a certain category or the concept in which that category exists. I'll just present in front of you a quote which might help us understand this further. This comes from a literary piece. "What kind of bird are you if you cannot fly?" said the little bird to the duck. A little bird said to the duck, "What kind of bird you are if you cannot fly?" And the duck replied, "What kind of bird are you if you cannot swim?" I mean, they both are talking about some typical features of bird, and we all know that we recognize bird more by their ability to fly. So those birds which can fly easily emerge into our mind as a bird as compared to those which cannot fly. So the birds with ability to fly can be considered as the prototype of the category bird. People create categories of things and assign the same meanings to other things which fall in the definition of that category. For example, all the objects which can fly and are living, we might consider them to put in the concept of a bird. Roch also states that human categorization should not be considered the arbitrary accident of some history or arbitrary product of some historical event or accident, but it is more organized in our minds. It's based on certain psychological principles of organization and categorization. This means that human cognition has a role to play in developing such categories and prototypes. Roch also argues that an object is assigned to a category through its comparison with the prototype. For example, we have a prototype of sparrow or pigeon in our mind for the concept bird. And every new object we find similar to pigeon or sparrow, we would be tempted to include it in the concept of bird. This prototype object consists of a mental entity in the human mind. So this is not out in the world only. This is how we develop a mental conceptualization of a certain concept. Then the experiments show that prototypes theory involves a psycho-linguistic notion. It's not only linguistic or experimental notion in the outer world, but it is also very much an inner experience of human beings. How they feel about things also has to do with how they develop a concept or a prototype of certain things. Prototypes may be very helpful in making people understand the meaning of certain things and objects and categories of things in a language, especially for the second language learners. For example, we teach them about the concept of bird, furniture, and then make them learn various things that fall in that category. But it must be noted with caution that these prototypes may vary from culture to culture. For example, they may also vary from concept, from individual to individual. Let me give you an example. For example, as I said earlier, we have a prototype of sparrow or pigeon in relation to the concept of bird in our own culture. But in a Western culture, there may be different prototypes of the word bird. So we need to think, and there might be a different prototype of word for the concept furniture in some African concept. So we need to see, while we are teaching these concepts based on prototype theory, we need to see that these prototypes may vary from culture to culture, and this may be taken as a drawback of this theory, and may be a kind of challenge for this theory to emerge as a universal theory.